Get this. What if a court could declare you impotent, even if doctors swear you're perfectly healthy? That's the bizarre, kind of mind-bending reality at the heart of a legal case we're diving into today. It's a story that starts with a simple question, but has a shockingly complex answer. So let's just put it right out there. Can you be legally impotent when you are physically, medically, 100% capable of having sex? I mean, it sounds impossible, right? But the answer is a definite yes, and that's what makes the case of Renuka versus Rajendra Hada so absolutely fascinating. So here's the entire puzzle in a nutshell. On one side, you have the husband, Rajendra. From day one, he's saying, our marriage was never consummated because my wife is impotent. But then on the other side, you have a medical board report from years later that says clear as day she is totally fit for intercourse. So how on earth did the court solve this impossible equation? Okay, let's rewind and go back to the very beginning. The wedding of Rajendra Hada and smut Renuka on March 6, 1992. Now, what was supposed to be the start of a new life together, well, it immediately became this intense battle of wills. It was a classic he said, she said, with two versions of the wedding night that were a universe apart. According to the husband, Rajendra, his new bride just pushed him away. He said she told him the marriage was forced on her and that she would not have a physical relationship with him, period. But Renuka's account, it's a complete mirror image of his. She claimed Rajendra was the one who threw her out of their room, confessing that he was the one forced into the marriage because he was in love with another woman. Wild, right? And the motives they each gave just made things even murkier. Rajendra claimed Renuka was devoted, we're talking mentally and physically, to a female guru, which made a relationship with any man impossible for her. Renuka's counterclaim? That this whole story was just an elaborate lie her husband made up to get rid of her. You've got two stories, both kind of plausible, but both totally impossible to prove. So where do you even begin to find the truth? With no real way of knowing who was telling the truth, the court had to turn to the law itself for an answer. And that's when the husband made a move that turned this messy personal dispute into a high-stakes legal chess match. So, in 1993, Rajendra filed a formal application. He asked the court, hey, can you order Renuka to get a medical exam to verify my claim? And the court agreed. The order was simple. Take the test and let's get to the bottom of this. But Renuka's response was anything but simple. She refused, flat out. And that one word, that single decision, would end up echoing through the courts for more than a decade. This is where the law gets really interesting. Her refusal triggered this powerful legal tool called an adverse inference. Think of it like this. If you're accused of stealing from the cookie jar and you refuse to show your hands, the court is allowed to assume it's because they're covered in crumbs. By refusing to produce evidence, in this case the results of a medical test, the court could legally presume that the evidence would have been bad for her case. Now, that adverse inference is a huge deal. But it's only a huge deal because of what the word impotence actually means in a court of law. And trust me, the legal definition is probably not what you think it is. Here it is, the definition from India's Supreme Court that changes everything. It says a person is impotent if their mental or physical condition makes consummation a practical impossibility. Now listen to those two phrases again, mental condition and practical impossibility. Those words are the entire key to this whole case. The law recognizes that a marriage is about way more than just biology. So what does this practical impossibility actually look like in the real world? Well, it can be a physical defect, sure, but it can also be entirely psychological. The law actually calls this an invincible repugnance to the act. And here's the real kicker. Even a persistent, stubborn, and just categorical refusal to consummate the marriage can be enough to meet that legal standard. So the bottom line is this. In the eyes of the law, your body might be perfectly willing and able, but if your mind and, crucially, your actions are not, that can be enough to end a marriage on the grounds of impotence. Okay, so now the court has all the pieces of the puzzle. You've got a wife who refuses a medical test, you've got a legal tool to interpret what that refusal means, and you've got this surprisingly broad definition of impotence. So how did they put it all together to finally reach a verdict? And this brings us right back to that huge, glaring contradiction we started with. It's the question that's been hanging over this whole case, right? If a medical board eventually found her to be perfectly healthy, how could the court possibly side with her husband? Well, the answer is all about timing. Just look at this timeline for a second. The marriage is in '92. The critical refusal happens just 1 year later, in 1993.
Based on that refusal, the first court annuls the marriage in '94. It isn't until 2006, that's 13 years later, during an appeal, that she finally agrees to the exam. For the High Court, that 13-year gap was a chasm that just couldn't be bridged.
So why did the court uphold the annulment and basically ignore that 2006 medical report? It's because it was just too little, too late. The most critical piece of evidence was her refusal way back in 1993. The court said, look, we have to judge the case based on the facts as they were then, not as they are now. The law has this very specific window. It cares about the time from the wedding day until the case is filed. What happens a decade later? Well, it just doesn't really count. So in the court's eyes, her actions spoke way louder than any medical report ever could. Her persistent refusal to consummate the marriage, combined with her categorical refusal to be tested at the time, that was all the proof they needed. It all added up to that invincible repugnance, which, under the law, is a form of impotence. Case closed. This entire case leaves us with a really profound question, though. It's about the power of the courts. I mean, how far should the law be able to intrude into our most private lives in its search for the truth? When does a person's right to privacy and just bodily autonomy end, and the court's need for evidence begin? There are no easy answers, but it's definitely something worth thinking about.